All right, let's do this. Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time, 1986. You've really outdone yourself with this stack of lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
Really fascinating stuff. Time travel, a little bit of history, even a touch of romance,
Right?
all wrapped up in that classic Iron Maiden energy. It's going to be fun to unpack this one.
Yeah, it really is. What's really interesting to me, at least from the outset, is how we've got a good mix of songwriters on this album.
Yeah,
So obviously Steve Harris, the bassist, he's written the majority.
of course. Yeah.
But then we've also got a couple of tracks from Adrian Smith, the guitarist,
Right.
and then even a couple that were like collaborations with people outside the band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm kind of curious to see how that affects the overall feel of the album, just lyrically.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've talked about how sometimes you can tell when a band's got a different songwriter. It's subtle, but it's there.
Exactly.
So why don't we just dive right in? That's the way to figure it out.
Oh, let's do it.
Caught Somewhere in Time, track 1. It really sets the tone, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. It's like it throws you right into the middle of this narrative with like this almost like a supernatural being who's in control of time
It's true, yeah.
and kind of dangling this journey in front of the listener.
It's almost like a gamble, isn't it? Like, come with me if you want to live kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like escape the ordinary. But you get that sense that maybe it's too good to be true.
Right, there's a danger there.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to trust this voice?
And I think that's what makes it so effective, right? Is that it's Steve Harris does a really good job of kind of playing with that tension between the allure of the unknown, but also that kind of underlying sense of like, maybe there's a price to pay here. And that chorus caught somewhere in time, I mean, chills every time.
It gets under your skin. It does. It makes you think about being swept away by something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, like you're not in control.
Right. And I wonder if that's a hint of what's to come on the rest of the album.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. And we see that, like, that sense of urgency carries over really well into Wasted Years,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
but in a different way. This time it's not so much like this external supernatural force, but more about like our own internal relationship with time.
This is where Adrian Smith really comes into his own, I think. It feels so personal, like the regret of looking back and realizing you were so busy chasing something that you didn't even enjoy the moment.
Right. And like that imagery he uses too, right?
Yeah.
Like traveling the world, but still feeling like a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful.
Yeah, it's like you can chase after something that you've lost, or you can embrace, being present in the moment.
It's a good message.
Yeah.
And one that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially those lines about living in the golden years, like this is it. This is all we've got.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't get a rewind button on life.
Oh. No, you don't. And then that flows so well into the loneliness of the long distance runner. Same kind of feeling, but different.
Yeah, there's a definite shift, right?
Oh, yeah.
This one feels a lot more raw, a lot more desperate almost.
Desperate, yeah. And it's not just time passing. It's that feeling of pushing yourself to the absolute limit.
Yeah.
Facing all these internal battles that, nobody else can fight for you.
Right, like that image of the pounding heart, struggling for every breath. It's very visceral.
It is. You feel it.
Yeah. And I think that's why it resonates with so many people,
Yeah.
Because it's Steve Harris is really tapping into that universal human experience of striving, even when it feels impossible. And I think that's the reason why he chose a long-distance runner for this,
Yeah.
It's that you're alone with your thoughts.
It's true. And even when you're surrounded by other runners, you're in your own head the whole time. And then that last line, run on, the loneliness of the long-distance runner.
Oh, man, haunting, right?
Yeah. It really is. It's like this mantra for anyone who feels lost. It's interesting, though, because it's such a solitary image, but it also speaks to this need for connection that we all have. Even when we feel alone, somebody else gets it.
Yeah.
Somebody else understands.
Right. You're not the only one. And speaking of feeling alone, Sea of Madness kind of takes us even further into that headspace. But this time, it's less about physical endurance. It's more about trying to navigate the chaos of our own minds.
This one's claustrophobic almost, like drowning in your own thoughts, crying in the streets, fires burning. I mean, come on.
It's not exactly subtle.
Well,
huh?
it's meant to overwhelm you. And that repetition of sadness, madness, it's like he's saying you get trapped in that cycle.
Yeah, it's a spiral.
But there is that little glimmer of hope, right?
There is. Always.
Somewhere I hear a voice that's calling. Out in the dark, there burns a dream. It's like even at your lowest point, something in you keeps fighting. That's classic Maiden, isn't it? Hope in the darkness.
It is.
Yeah, and that search for meaning kind of takes us right into Heaven Can Wait.
Big existential questions in this one. Do you think there's a connection there from those first 4 songs?
Oh, absolutely. There's a definite through line, right?
Yeah.
We've gone from being swept away by time to regretting the past, feeling completely alone in our struggles, and now, bam,
Yeah.
facing down our own mortality.
It's like each song builds on the anxieties of the one before it. And the way he describes that near-death experience, it's chilling, man, looking down at your own body.
Yeah. It's powerful stuff. But again, Maiden doesn't leave us hanging. This isn't just about passively accepting fate.
No. This is Heaven Can Wait Till Another Day. It's defiance.
Yeah, exactly. Like a refusal to be controlled even by something as inevitable as death. Bold statement.
It is. It speaks to that whole theme of confronting challenges head on, I think. But, I think it's time to move on to something a little
more.
A little bolder.
Bolder. Yeah, I like it.
Speaking of bold, how do you top defying death?
I mean, if you're Iron Maiden, you conquer Persia. Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
Talk about an epic. Steve Harris, he knows how to write them.
He does. It's like a masterclass in historical storytelling, but set to music.
It's true.
You get Alexander's ambition, that drive to conquer the world, all in just a few verses.
And it's not just like a dry history lesson.
No.
He throws in those lines from King Philip about his kingdom being too small. Gives you chills. It's like suddenly you understand the scale of Alexander's ambition right from childhood.
Yeah, sets the stage.
It does. It's like you're right there on the battlefield with him, witnessing this empire rise and fall. But here's the thing. It's not just about glorifying war.
No.
There's this undercurrent of tragedy, the sense that even Alexander, in all his power, couldn't outrun fate.
Right.
He died a lonely man.
That's a good point. Even the most powerful figures in history, they're still human,
They are. And that idea, that vulnerability, it kind of carries over into Stranger in a Strange Land, but in a more subtle way.
Yeah, much more introspective, this one.
This is Adrian Smith again, taking us on a completely different journey.
Yeah, definitely.
It's less about literal battles and more about that internal struggle of feeling lost, disconnected.
Right.
You contrast that with the grand, sweeping epic of Alexander the Great, and then you've got this. It's almost melancholic.
It is. It's interesting, You get that sense of exploration, the passage of time, but it's always tinged with this kind of, sadness.
It's true.
Like he's searching for something, but not sure if he'll ever find it.
Almost like those classic adventure stories. The hero comes home, but he's changed, haunted by what he's seen.
Exactly.
Preserved in time, forgotten by the world.
Ooh.
That line gets me every time. It makes you wonder, what's the point of achieving your goals if you lose yourself along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it ties into the bigger themes of the album.
Oh, definitely.
Like this constant reminder that time keeps moving. The choices we make, they have consequences.
They do, but, we've been in our feelings for a while now. Maybe time for a little levity.
Oh, yeah. What do you have in mind?
Sheriff of Huddersfield.
Oh, perfect.
Pure Maiden. Poking fun at themselves, the music industry, and still delivering a killer tune.
It's great satire.
Oh, it is. You can tell they're having a blast with this one. The way they play up the contrast between Rod Smallwood, their manager from Yorkshire, and then his life in L.A. Hilarious.
Complete fish out of water.
Totally. But also, it's relatable. We all know someone like that, a little out of their element.
Yeah, you're right. We do. And they capture him perfectly.
Oh.
Like little details, a custom-made wallet that stays in his pocket, always cheats when he deals. Like, you can tell they're really fond of him, even when they're making fun of him.
It's like a roast, but with love.
Exactly. A loving roast.
Speaking of which, Deja Vu takes us for a bit of a psychological spin.
This is one of those songs, I swear, every time it comes on, I feel like I'm stepping into the Twilight Zone.
Right.
That uncanny feeling of repeating experiences.
Yeah.
Questioning your own sanity. It's classic Maiden, though, the way they weave together those supernatural elements with these really human anxieties.
It's masterful. And that chorus, too, feel like I've been here before. It's catchy, but also kind of creepy.
Yeah, a little unsettling, especially after everything else we've heard on the album so far.
Right. It's like all those themes, time, fate, how fragile our own perceptions can be. They all come crashing together in this one song.
Yeah, like it's all connected somehow.
But, for an album that goes to some pretty dark places, somewhere in time, also has a lot of heart, Juanita, Now there's the straight-up rock and roll heartbreak anthem, if I've ever heard one.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But with that classic Maiden twist.
Yeah, of course.
It would have been so easy to just make it another song about heartbreak, right?
Yeah.
But there's this defiance in it, a refusal to be forgotten. I'm never going back, Juanita, but you can still hear the pain in his voice.
Oh, for sure. That rawness, it's relatable, you know? It's not even just being angry. It's more like, you know something's over, but you're not ready to let go.
It's that, like, gut-wrenching feeling.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, you've got That Girl. Now, there's a different kind of love song.
Oh, yeah. Intense, right?
Intense. This isn't your typical lovey-dovey ballad.
Not at all.
This is possessive, almost predatory. The way those lines repeat, that girl, that girl.
Like a warning, almost, or like a mantra.
It's primal. It's not even romance at this point. It's need.
The kind of need that can consume you.
Totally.
It's interesting, though,
What's that?
the way you put it, that primal need.
Yeah.
Because we've got these larger-than-life figures like Alexander the Great.
Right.
And then that girl brings in so close, it's like he's drawing a parallel, ambition and obsession. That fine line where one bleeds into the other.
You know, you're right. That's a great point because we've got these huge figures, right? Like literally conquering the world. And then that girl just zeroes in on that like almost animalistic need for connection.
Yeah,
It makes me wonder if maybe subconsciously Steve Harris is drawing a parallel between the two, that line between ambition and obsession.
I think that's a really insightful point because throughout this whole album, we see these characters, right, wrestling with these very human desires for power, for love, for escape.
Yeah.
And more often than not, those desires lead them down these really interesting dark paths.
Makes you think about the title, Somewhere in Time.
Yeah.
It's not just about literally traveling through time. It's about those moments in our lives, that change everything.
The ones you can never take back, for better or worse.
Exactly. And what's so cool is how these themes get explored through all these different musical styles. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like you've got Alexander the Great with those driving rhythms.
Okay.
And then the melancholy vibe of Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah, totally different feel.
Even the humor of Sheriff of Huddersfield. It's like taking a trip through the whole human experience all in one album.
And I think that's part of what makes a great album.
Yeah.
Like any great art, it sparks these connections, it gets people thinking, makes you look inward a little bit.
So true.
One find your own meaning in it.
Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. I mean, we've talked about everything from, the nature of time itself to the complexities of love,
Yeah.
the dangers of ambition.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in these lyrics.
Oh, absolutely.
So to anyone listening out there, we want to hear from you. What really resonated with you? What threads did you pick up on? Because this isn't the end of the conversation.
No, not at all.
Go back, give it another listen, see what new layers you find.
You might surprise yourself.
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe you'll even discover something new about yourself along the way. Until next time.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Keep diving deep.